The sun of San Miguel de Allende cast a golden light over the patio of my daughter's house, a light that seemed to mock the shadow settling in my soul. The stucco walls in shades of ochre and terracotta embraced a lush garden, where the scent of bougainvillea mixed with the expensive smell of tequila and gourmet food. The central fountain, a work of art in cantera stone, whispered an aquatic melody, but its sound was muffled by the polished laughter of the guests, most of them expatriates like my son-in-law, Ricardo. I felt like an ancient, cracked piece of pottery amidst a collection of baccarat crystal, displaced and fragile. My dress, the best I had, was a simple embroidered cotton fabric, bought at the local market. It seemed insignificant next to the linens and silks that floated around me. My hands, calloused from a lifetime of shaping clay, rested in my lap, and I hid them instinctively, as if they were proof of a past that did not belong in that place. I watched my daughter, radiant in a dress that probably cost more than I earned in 6 months, floating among the guests, her smile never reaching her eyes when she passed by me, as if she feared my simplicity might tarnish her carefully constructed image. Jorge, my husband, was by my side, his silence a refuge. He, a man of few words, but of an integrity as solid as the stone of the pyramids, held my hand, his warm fingers enveloping mine. He too felt like a stranger here, but his strength was my anchor. He looked at Ricardo with an indecipherable expression, a calm that precedes the storm. Ricardo, in turn, was the king in his castle. At 47, he exuded an air of superiority, his cold blue eyes sweeping the room, judging everyone and everything, especially me. The celebration was the baptism of our grandson, a little angel asleep in a white wicker bassinet. The moment for presents arrived, and my heart began to beat erratically. The guests approached with boxes from famous brands, expensive educational toys, and miniature designer clothes. I waited, holding a small polished wooden box against my chest. Inside, it rested the most significant piece I owned, a silver angel collar, a family tradition. A charm said to whisper to guardian angels to protect the child. With trembling legs, I stood up and walked towards the bassinet. Every step on the polished tile floor seemed to echo my inadequacy. The gazes turned to me, and the murmur of conversation subsided. I got close to my grandson, his face serene, and for an instant, the outside world disappeared. Only the overwhelming love I felt for that little being mattered. With trembling hands, I opened the small box and offered it, not to him, but to my daughter, who stood beside her husband. My daughter took the box, but before she could even look inside, Ricardo intercepted it. He took out the delicate silver angel collar, holding it between his thumb and forefinger as if it were an exotic and unpleasant insect. He shook it lightly, the soft, crystalline sound of the small bell getting lost in the tension that suddenly filled the air. His lips curled into a disdainful smile, and he raised his voice so everyone could hear. "How rustic," he said, the word hanging in the air like a poison. He looked directly at me, his cold eyes stripping me of any dignity I might still have had. "Thank you, Elena, but we'll put this away. It doesn't match the nursery's decor." The sentence was a physical blow. I felt the air leave my lungs, the humiliation burning my face like the midday sun. He hadn't even addressed his wife, but me, the source of that rustic offense. The next gesture was what broke me. With a careless, almost annoyed movement, he handed the angel collar to one of the maids passing with a tray, as if he were discarding a piece of trash, something of no value at all. The maid, a young local woman, took the object with a look of compassion in my direction, recognizing the value her employer despised. The patio fell into an awkward silence. The sound of the fountain seemed to scream in my ears. In that instant, I was no longer the hostess's mother, the grandmother of the baptized baby. I was a nuisance, an embarrassing relic of a Mexico that Ricardo wanted to keep outside his high walls. That angel collar was not just a gift. It was a piece of my faith, of my love, of my history. By discarding it, he discarded me. I felt my eyes fill with tears, and the only thing I wanted was for the ground to open up and swallow me. The world seemed to move in slow motion. I saw my daughter's face, pale, her lips parted, but silent. She said nothing. Her silence was the second stab, deeper and more painful than the first. She, my blood, my girl, stood still while her husband dismantled her mother's soul in public, because of a piece of silver and a belief he considered primitive. The pain of his rejection was sharp, but the pain of her abandonment was unbearable. Then a firm hand touched my arm. It was Jorge. He moved with a deliberate calm that contrasted violently with the chaos in my chest. He walked to the maid, who was still holding the angel collar, paralyzed. With a gentleness that made me cry, he took the small charm from her hand, holding it in his palm as if it were the most precious treasure in the world. He then turned, not to me, but to Ricardo. His eyes, normally gentle, now burned with a contained fury. The atmosphere in the patio changed instantly. The air, once heavy with humiliation, now crackled with a recovered dignity. Jorge held up the angel collar for all to see, its silvery glint catching a ray of sun. The confrontation was about to begin, and I knew that nothing would ever be the same again. His voice, when he finally spoke, was not loud, but it cut through the silence like a blade. "This object," he began, his gaze fixed on Ricardo, "has more value and history than anything your money can buy. It represents the faith that protects this family, a faith you clearly do not understand." Each word was a blow, returning the offense with a moral force that money could not buy. The final blow, however, was not for Ricardo. Jorge turned slowly to our daughter, his face a mask of disappointment and pain. His eyes, which had always looked at her with adoration, now questioned her with a depth that made her take a step back. "And you, my daughter," he said, his voice breaking slightly for the first time. "How do you allow your mother's love to be treated? Like trash?" The question hung in the air, an accusation not of anger, but of a broken heart, sealing the beginning of the end of that party, and, perhaps, of our family as we knew it. The party didn't end with a polite goodbye. It shattered. The silence that followed Jorge's words was dense, heavy, broken only by the distant sound of the fountain that had once seemed so cheerful. The guests averted their gazes, suddenly very interested in their shoes or the bottom of their glasses. Ricardo's face, previously pale with surprise, was now red with a barely contained fury. His blue eyes, cold as ice, promised a silent and terrible retaliation. He didn't say a word, but his whole body screamed hatred. I saw my daughter shrink under the weight of her father's and her husband's stares, a leaf caught between two stones. Jorge didn't wait for an answer. He carefully placed the angel collar in his shirt pocket, close to his heart, and took my hand firmly. "Let's go home, Elena," he said in a low voice, but his command was unquestionable. We turned and walked to the exit, crossing the patio that now seemed like a battlefield. No one tried to stop us. I felt dozens of eyes on my back, some of pity, others of morbid curiosity. I didn't look back. I couldn't. If I saw my daughter's face one more time, the barrage of tears I was holding back so forcefully would surely break. The path out of that luxurious house was the longest walk of my life. Each step took us further from our daughter, and our grandson, and the solid wooden door that closed behind us sounded like a final sentence. The cool night air of San Miguel had never felt so cold. We got into our old car, a model that completely clashed with the imported vehicles parked on the street. The contrast between the two worlds had never been so stark, so painful. Their world, of wealth and facade, and ours, of simplicity, and until that moment, of peace. The journey home was made in absolute silence. Jorge drove with his hands, firm on the steering wheel, his jaw clenched. I looked out the window at the cobblestone streets illuminated by lanterns, the beauty of the city passing me by without me registering it. In my chest, a war was being waged. Immense gratitude for my husband, for his unwavering defense, fought against a paralyzing fear of what would come next. He had not only defended me, he had declared war on a powerful and vengeful man, and had exposed the deepest wound in our relationship with our only daughter. When we arrived at our modest street, the simple, colorful houses seemed to embrace me. It was my place, my world, but for the first time, it felt vulnerable, threatened. Inside our small house, where every object told a story, the silence persisted. Jorge finally looked at me, his eyes filled with a pain that mirrored my own. He took the angel collar out of his pocket and placed it in my hands. Holding it again was like reclaiming a piece of myself. The tears I had held back finally came, silent and bitter, and I cried for the rejected gift, for the lost daughter, for the broken piece. That night, I couldn't sleep. I went to my old pottery workshop in the back of the house, a small room that smelled of damp earth and mineral paints. That place was my sanctuary. There I was not the inadequate mother-in-law or the rustic old woman. There, I was a creator. I ran my fingers over a dusty potter's wheel, remembering a life where my hands were a source of pride, not shame. I remembered my own mother teaching me to feel the clay, to give it shape, to create beauty from the earth. I remembered how this art had sustained me, not just financially, but spiritually. For years, every piece I sold at the craft market carried a fragment of my soul. It was with the money from the pottery that I helped build this house, brick by brick, alongside Jorge. It was in this same simple patio that we raised our daughter, teaching her the value of honest work, of respect for our roots, of a love that manifests in gestures, not in expensive gifts. Where did she forget all of this? I met Jorge when he came to fix a roof in the neighborhood. He was quiet, strong, and had the most honest gaze I had ever seen. He wasn't impressed by my art, but by the passion I had for it. He saw the strength in my clay-stained hands. Our love was built on this foundation of mutual admiration and shared values. We never had much money, but we had respect, complicity, and a home filled with a love that needed no external approval. It was a solid love, like the earth I molded. Our daughter, our light, grew up in this environment. I remember her little hands trying to imitate mine, covering herself in clay with a radiant smile. She loved the stories behind each pattern, each symbol we painted. She wore an angel collar that I made for her, and she believed in its magic with all her heart. She was part of our world, woven into our heritage with threads of joy and belonging. The pain I felt was for that little girl, the girl I felt I had lost forever. Then, Ricardo appeared, an American investor who saw in San Miguel de Allende not a culture to be embraced, but a business opportunity and an exotic backdrop for his life of luxury. He was charming, rich, and offered my daughter a world of travel, elegant dinners, and social recognition that we could never give her. Slowly, subtly, she began to change. She began to be ashamed of our simple ways, to correct our Spanish, to ask that we not wear certain clothes when her important friends were around. At first, I ignored it. I told myself it was a phase, that she was just adapting to a new social circle. I justified her small cruelties as being his influence, not hers. When she asked me not to tell poor people's stories in front of Ricardo, I fell silent, swallowing the pain to keep the peace. Every time I kept quiet, a small piece of my dignity was eroded. I became an accomplice in my own erasure, all for fear of losing her. Baptism was not the first blow. It was just the most public, the most brutal. It was the culmination of years of small humiliations, of forced smiles, and of a silence that had become a chasm between us. The rejection of the angel collar was the perfect metaphor for the rejection of everything I represented. Tradition, faith, a past that didn't fit the polished narrative they were building for themselves. And my daughter's silence in that moment was the confirmation that she had, finally, chosen a side. The days that followed that party were the longest and most silent of my life. The phone didn't ring. No messages came. It was as if we had been completely erased from her life. Ricardo, in his fury, had surely forbidden her from contacting us, and she, once again, obeyed. The silence was a punishment, a cold and effective weapon that isolated us in our small house, leaving us with only our memories and the pain of the rupture. Jorge felt the tension as much as I did. He tried to keep busy with small repairs around the house, but I would see him stop, stare into space, the weight of the world on his shoulders. He did not regret what he did. His integrity would not allow it, but he suffered from the consequence, from the pain he saw in my eyes, and for the daughter he also felt he was losing. The joy had drained from our home, replaced by a constant anxiety and a deep sadness. The lack of news was a torture. Every car that slowed down on the street made my heart leap. A false hope that it was her, coming to apologize, coming to see us. But the street always remained empty. I started to doubt everything. Should I have kept quiet? Should I have swallowed that humiliation one more time, as I had so many times before, for the sake of keeping the family together? But then I would look at the angel collar on my nightstand and know that Jorge had done the right thing. Peace cannot exist without respect. One night, about 2 weeks after the baptism, I woke up to a strange noise. Jorge was sitting on the edge of the bed, his hand on his chest, his face pale and covered in sweat. He could barely breathe. Panic seized me, cold and overwhelming. I called an ambulance, my hands shaking so much I could barely dial the numbers. In that moment, the fight, the humiliation, everything seemed small in the face of the terrifying fear of losing my life partner. At the hospital, the smell of antiseptic and the beeping of machines created a symphony of anxiety. The hours dragged on. Finally, a young doctor came to talk to me. He said that Jorge had suffered an acute stress crisis, an angina pectoris triggered by extreme emotional pressure. He was stable, but he needed absolute rest and to stay away from any source of stress. The diagnosis was a punch to the gut. The scene at the party had not only broken our family, it was breaking my husband's heart. The news of Jorge's illness was what finally broke the barrier of silence. I was the one who called her, not with anger, but with a cold, practical necessity. "Your father is in the hospital," I said, without preamble. There was a long silence on the other end of the line, followed by a choked gasp. I didn't need to say why. She knew. The guilt, which was once a suspicion, now became a concrete and heavy certainty. The weight of that call hung between us. I didn't ask her to come. I didn't beg. I just informed her. The responsibility was now entirely hers. She would have to live with the consequences of her passivity, of her loyalty to a man who valued the decoration of a room more than her father's health. The choice she needed to make was no longer about pride or shame, but about life, death, and the kind of person she wanted to be. 2 days later, Jorge was already home, fragile, but recovering. I took care of him, my heart a mixture of relief and resentment. The peace in our house was the peace of a cemetery. It was then that I heard it. A soft, hesitant knock on our front door. My heart stopped. I went to the door and looked through the peephole. It was her, alone. Her face was swollen from crying, her shoulders slumped. She wasn't there for an easy reconciliation. I could see in her posture the tension of someone coming to fulfill an obligation. Ricardo had probably sent her to demand an apology for the scene Jorge had caused, using his illness as a form of manipulation. She was trapped between her husband's tyranny and the newly awakened guilt over her father's condition. She was the battlefield where this family war would finally be fought. I opened the door slowly. We faced each other for a moment that felt like an eternity. Her eyes, so much like mine, were filled with a whirlwind of conflicting emotions: guilt, fear, sadness, and perhaps a spark of defiance. She was no longer the polished hostess or the silent daughter. She was a woman at a crossroads, forced to confront the truth she had tried so hard to ignore. The real confrontation would not be mine, but hers, with herself. I invited her in with a nod of my head, my face a mask of calm I didn't feel. She entered our small living room, the simple, memory-filled environment seeming to judge her. She looked around at the old photos on the walls, at the blanket I had knitted over the sofa. Every object was a silent witness to the life she had left behind. I didn't guide her to the living room. Instead, I turned and walked towards my workshop in the back. If we were going to talk, it would be on my territory, in the place where my strength resided. The smell of earth and dust in my workshop was the scent of my truth. My daughter followed me in, her expensive shoes treading hesitantly on the packed cement floor. Her eyes scanned the room, the shelves full of unfinished pots, the worn-out tools, the bags of clay stacked in the corner. To her, who lived in a world of polished surfaces and minimalist decor, this place must have seemed like a primitive chaos. It was the same disdain I saw in her husband's eyes, but on her face, there was also a layer of memory, a recollection of a childhood she had strived to forget. I sat on my old wooden bench, in front of the potter's wheel. The gesture was as natural to me as breathing. I took a piece of wet clay, feeling its familiar coolness in my hands. I threw it onto the center of the spinning plate, and with a touch of the pedal, the wheel began to turn. My hands, firm and steady, enveloped the clay, beginning to give it shape. I wasn't looking at her, but I felt her restless presence, her nervous energy filling the small space. She was in my world now, and the rules were mine. She cleared her throat, the sound small and lost amidst the soft hum of the wheel. "Mom," she began, her voice fragile. "I came because we are all very shaken. Dad in the hospital. Ricardo feels that what happened at the party was a big misunderstanding. He thinks that if Dad would just apologize for the scene, we could all move on." The words stumbled out, a rehearsed speech that sounded false even to her. She was delivering her master's message, and the weight of that betrayal was visible in her posture. My hand stopped the wheel's motion. The humming ceased, and a deep silence fell over the workshop. Slowly, I lifted my gaze from the clay and fixed it on hers. There was no anger in my eyes, only a clarity that seemed to come from a very old and deep place within me. The fragile, humiliated woman from the party had disappeared. In her place was the matriarch of a lineage of strong women who shaped the earth with their own hands. I let the silence stretch, forcing her to face the abyss she had helped create. "My daughter," I said, my voice serene, yet as firm as stone. "Love does not survive where there is no respect." I let the sentence hang between us. "You don't live in a house, you live in a display case. A display case where everything must be perfect, polished, and approved by your husband. But true. Love is not a decorative object. It is like this clay. Sometimes it's messy, imperfect, but it's real, and it cannot be molded by fear or shame." What happened at that party was not a misunderstanding, it was a choice. I continued, my voice never wavering. His contempt for my gift didn't hurt me because of the object's value. It hurt me because he despised our history. He looked at a symbol of our faith, the same faith you were baptized with, and called it rustic, as if it were a disease. He dishonored not only me, but your grandmother, and her grandmother. He dishonored the hands that made this country, and the hands that raised the daughter he is so proud to display as a trophy. Then, I leaned forward, the intensity of my gaze pinning her in place. "The man you married dishonored me and your heritage. But the greater pain, my dear, the greater pain was your silence." I saw a tremor run through her body. "When he humiliated me in front of everyone, I didn't look for justice in his eyes. I looked for it in yours, and I found nothing. No flicker of defense, no spark of loyalty, just a frightened emptiness. In that moment, it wasn't he who broke my heart, it was you. The truth was a terrible and liberating weapon. You stood there, silent, while he handed a piece of my soul to a maid as if it were trash. You, who wore one of these around your neck as a child and believed it truly called angels. You, who learned to read on my lap and to dream in our small patio. Your silence told me you were more afraid of displeasing your husband than of defending your mother. And that, my daughter, is a wound that no apology can heal." I turned my attention back to the clay, my hands resuming their work with deliberate calm. The cylinder of clay began to transform into a vase under the gentle pressure of my fingers. "I don't need his approval," I said, almost to myself, but knowing that every word hit her like a stone. "I have lived 71 years in this world. I know the value of my hands and the strength of my faith. The opinion of a rich man who confuses price with value means nothing to me. I don't want his apology. Then, I stopped the wheel again and looked at her, my eyes now moist, but not with weakness. But I need my daughter's respect. My voice broke for the first time. I need to know that the woman I raised still exists somewhere in there. Respect isn't agreeing with everything I say or do. It's honoring where you came from. It's drawing a line in the sand and saying, "You may not like my mother, but you will respect her. You will not humiliate her in front of me." That is respect. That is love. I pointed to the clay in my hands. Soon your son will be old enough to understand the world. What will he learn from you? That family is disposable, that heritage is something to be ashamed of? Or will he learn from his mother's example to have courage, to stand up for what is right, even when it's hard? Will he see a woman who bows to the power of money or a woman who stands up for the power of love? The final question came, not as an accusation, but as a passing of the baton. I will not ask you to choose between me and him. That is a choice no mother should demand. But you need to make a more important choice. You need to decide what kind of family you want for your son. A family built on the solid foundation of respect, or one built on the shifting sands of appearance? It was then that she crumbled. Not loudly, but in a silent, devastating collapse. Her shoulders trembled, and the tears she had been holding back began to roll down her face. No longer tears of superficial guilt, but of a deep and agonizing self-assessment. She didn't try to defend herself, didn't try to argue. She just stood there, stripped of all her excuses, facing the reflection of herself that my words had painted. I didn't go to her. I didn't hug her. My love for her demanded that I let her face that pain alone. It was the pain of growth, the pain necessary to break the cocoon she had built for herself. I just turned back to my wheel, to my clay, to my center. The vase in my hands was almost finished. It had a simple, strong, honest shape, like love should be. After a long, heavy silence, I heard the sound of her footsteps moving away. She didn't say goodbye. There was nothing to be said. As she left my workshop, she was leaving behind not just me, but also the version of herself that had walked in. The door closed softly, and the sound was not one of an end, but of a possibility. The choice now was entirely hers, and I, for the first time in a long time, felt a deep, melancholic peace. I had recovered my voice. Are you enjoying this story? Leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Now, we continue with the video. When my daughter left, the pottery workshop fell into a silence that was both empty and full of potential. I remained seated before my unfinished vase, my heart beating in a slow, steady rhythm. I didn't feel the euphoria of victory, but the exhausted peace of a soldier after a long battle. I had released my truth into the world, but I had no control over what it would do. The seed was planted, but whether it would bloom or die in the arid soil of my daughter's life, only time would tell. In that moment, I accepted this uncertainty, because I knew I had done the only thing I could. I had honored myself. Weeks later, on a quiet afternoon while tending to my garden, she told me what happened after she left. My house. She had driven aimlessly through the streets of San Miguel, my words echoing in her mind. She saw the city not with the eyes of a wealthy expatriate, but with the eyes of the girl she once was, seeing the beauty and history in every stone, in every face. The truth of what she had become hit her with the force of a collision. She stopped the car at a viewpoint overlooking the city and cried for hours, mourning not the fight, but the person she had allowed to get lost. That night, she confronted Ricardo. It wasn't the hysterical scene he might have expected. It was something that scared him much more. A glacial calm. She waited for him to finish his speech about how she should have controlled her primitive parents. And then, with a voice that did not tremble, she laid down her new laws. My mother and father will be treated with respect by you and by our friends. Our home will be open to them always. My son will know the history of his family, my history, and you will learn to honor it, or you will risk losing us. His reaction, she told me, was a spectacle of fury and disbelief. He accused her of ingratitude, threatened to cut off her luxurious lifestyle, but he saw something new in her eyes, a determination that could not be bought or intimidated. He realized that the submissive woman he had so carefully molded had shattered, and from her fragments, an unknown and much stronger woman had emerged, faced with the real prospect of losing the facade of his perfect family. He backed down. It wasn't a conversion, but a strategic surrender. A few days later, she appeared at our door. There was no formal apology, as words seemed too small. Instead, she brought shopping bags with Jorge's favorite foods and a bouquet of flowers from the market, the same ones I used to buy. Her first act of rebellion against Ricardo's world was to embrace ours. "How is Dad?" she asked. And in that simple question, I heard the sound of a bridge being rebuilt, plank by plank, over the chasm that separated us. The healing was not instantaneous. It was a slow, sometimes painful process. There were difficult conversations and silences filled with unsaid things, but the foundation had changed. Jorge's recovery became the neutral ground where we could meet. My daughter came every day, sat beside him, read the newspaper to him, and in her gestures of care, I saw a repentance deeper than any words. She was, in her own way, mending the heart she had helped to break, while my family found its new balance. Something inside me was also awakening. The strength I had found in that workshop could not be contained. One day, looking at the dusty wheel, I made a decision. I swept away the dust, prepared new bags of clay, and opened the doors to my sanctuary. I was no longer going to hide. I was going to create. The woman who had felt like an unwanted relic had died. In her place, an artisan was reborn from the ashes of humiliation. It was in this process that a new philosophy flourished in my mind. Dignity is not something others give us or take away. It is something we shape with our own hands. Like a clay pot, it can be fragile, it can be broken, but as long as we have the raw material of our truth and the strength of our will, we can always rebuild it, stronger and more beautiful than before. This idea became my mantra, my new reason for being. With this new purpose, I did something I had never dared to do. I put a small sign on my door. Free pottery. Classes for children. Bring your imagination. In the first week, 3 shy children came. In the second, 10. In a month, my small patio was filled with the most wonderful sound in the world. The laughter of children discovering the joy of creating something with their own muddy hands. Watching them was my greatest healing. I was not just teaching an art, I was passing on a heritage. I told the stories my mother told me, explained the ancient symbols, showed them that in their veins ran the history of a creative and resilient people. I was giving them an armor of cultural pride, one that, I hoped, no one would ever call rustic. My pain was being transformed into joy for others. My daughter watched this transformation in silence. She saw the light that had returned to my eyes, saw the life that had returned to our home. One day, she sat with me on the patio, watching the children. "What you are doing here, Mom," she said with a choked voice, "is more valuable than anything Ricardo's money can buy, and I want to be a part of it. I want to help build something that lasts." That was her true reparation. She proposed that we create a foundation, a place that would not only teach pottery, but that would preserve the arts and crafts of our region, offering opportunities for young artists. She would handle the bureaucracy, the funding, using the shrewdness she learned in Ricardo's world to serve ours. It was the perfect union of our two worlds, the synthesis of our journeys. Thus was born the Living Heritage Foundation. Working with my daughter side by side was the final reconciliation. We didn't speak of the painful past, as we were too busy building a vibrant future. In our planning meetings, I saw in her the intelligent and passionate girl I had raised, now fused with the strong and capable woman she had become. We were shaping something new together, not from clay, but from hope. Today, our home is no longer a place of silence and pain. Jorge is strong again, his laughter echoing through the patio as he fixes a small stool for one of the children from the workshop. The family that almost disintegrated has been rebuilt on a more honest and unshakable foundation. We are not perfect, the scars still exist, but they remind us of the battle we won. The humiliation I suffered became the catalyst for the liberation of us all, a fire that burned the lies and forged a stronger truth in its place. Epilogue. 2 years have passed. 2 years since. The conversation in my workshop. 2 years since the first crack of light penetrated the darkness. Tonight, that light floods a beautifully restored gallery in the heart of San Miguel de Allende. The air vibrates with lively conversations, soft guitar music, and the clinking of glasses. It is the opening night of the Living Heritage Foundation's first exhibition, and my heart is so full it feels like it will overflow. The white walls are adorned with the soul of our land, vibrant ceramics, intricate textiles, paintings that tell stories. It is a celebration of that same culture that was once called rustic. I walk through the gallery, not as a shy guest, but as its co-founder. People stop me, congratulate me, shake my hand, and I see in their eyes a genuine respect. I see the young artists whose careers the foundation is helping to launch, their faces beaming with pride next to their works. I see the families of the children who attend my classes, thanking me with a warmth that money can't buy. Tonight, this gallery is the richest place in the world, and its wealth is measured in dignity and realized dreams. My daughter is the personification of grace and competence. She is no longer her husband's shadow. She is a force of nature in her own right. With a microphone in hand, she gets on a small stage and speaks about the Foundation's mission. Her voice is clear, passionate, and full of conviction. She talks about the importance of honoring one's roots, of building bridges between the past and the future. She thanks the sponsors, the artists, and finally, she looks at me across the crowd, her eyes filling with tears. And I thank my mother, Elena, whose strength and art are the cornerstone of all of this. Ricardo is here. He is not at the center of attention, as he used to be. He is near a column in the back, holding a glass of wine he barely touches. His posture is not one of arrogance, but of observation. He watches his wife on stage, not with a look of possession, but with something that resembles admiration. He sees the respect she commands, the passion that moves her, and I know he understands that this strong woman is far more captivating than the submissive doll he tried to create. He didn't change by magic, but by necessity, and in that process, perhaps he caught a glimpse of something more true. Beside me, Jorge squeezes my hand. His health is completely restored, and his eyes shine with a pride so intense it moves me. He says, "Nothing," but he doesn't need to. We share a silence that is no longer of pain or tension, but of deep complicity and triumph. We look at what we have built together, not just a family that survived, but a legacy that has flourished from the scars. We see the result of his courage that day, the act of a quiet man who chose honor over convenience. And then, a sound cuts through the crowd's conversation, a sound of pure joy. It's the laugh of my grandson, now almost 3 years old, running through the open space of the gallery. He is not being restrained or silenced. He is being celebrated, a small personification of life and the future. He runs with the freedom of a child who is at home, safe and loved, in a space that celebrates who he is and where he comes from. He is living proof that the battle was worth it. Around his little neck, swinging with his joyful movements, is the silver angel collar. It shines under the gallery lights, a beacon of hope. It is not a relic kept in a drawer, nor a symbol of shame. It is a treasure worn with pride. A little girl runs up to him, points to the pendant, and my grandson holds it up and shakes it. The soft, crystalline sound echoes through the hall. The sound that was once silenced by humiliation is now the soundtrack of our redemption. The circle is closed. My daughter comes down from the stage and walks towards us, picking up her son in her arms and kissing him. Ricardo approaches, a little hesitant, and stops beside her. For a moment, we are all there, the 4 of us, a family. Not a perfect magazine family, but a real family, forged in fire, with its flaws and its strength. Ricardo looks at me and gives me a brief but meaningful nod. Is it an apology? A sign of respect? Perhaps both. And I accept it. The final image of the night, the one I will keep in my heart forever, is of the three of us. Me, my daughter, and my grandson, in front of a large wall covered with small ceramic tiles, each one painted by one of the children from the first workshop class. My hand is on my grandson's shoulder, the angel collar resting near my fingers. My daughter's arm is around me. We are 3 generations of a heritage that refused to die, that refused to be silenced. Looking at those pieces of childish art, vibrant and imperfect, I understand the deepest lesson of all. Family, like pottery, can crack under pressure. It can be broken by neglect and contempt. But with love, courage, and the willingness to get your hands dirty, it can be repaired. And often the glue that binds it back together makes it not just whole, but infinitely stronger and more valuable than it was before. Our family did not just survive, it transformed. Has a gesture of kindness ever changed your life? Leave a little heart if you believe that love is more powerful than any wealth. Subscribe for more stories of second chances. Comment, "Love has no price," if you also believe in human kindness.